Bruchim Aboyim to the fifth in the continuing series of lectures of shiurim on the oral tradition of the written law. And we're going to, having established that there was an oral tradition of the written law, we're going to actually see how this oral tradition, in fact, was used by Chazal, or in fact by the Rishonim, in order to in understanding the Chumash. And I think the first place, I think it's a natural place to begin with, will be actually in Sefer Devarim, Deuteronomy, the Mishnah Torah, and in particular with the Perush par excellence of the Torah, which is the Perush of the Ramban, of Nachmanides. And we're going to see actually how Nachmanides, how the Ramban, in fact, makes an important usage of the concept of orality. Okay, the oral law. And in fact, actually, he's going to actually learn that the oral law, the Teresh B'Al Peh, is part and parcel of the Chumash itself, and specifically in Sefer Devarim, in the Mishnah Torah. Now, it's well known as two types of Hagdamas, two types of introductions, that Sefer Devarim is in fact distinct from the other Sfarim, the other Chumshei Torah. Much ink has been spilt on this. Those of you who are interested, you can look at actually the Hagdama of the Ramban to Sefer Devarim, from which I'm going to quote in a few minutes. There's a very famous Hagdama of the Orachayim, right? Who quotes the Gemara Megillah Amud Aleph with Beis, that the Kolosh of Mishnah Torah Moshe mipi atzmai omron. I think this Orachayim goes on, explains the important distinctions and the nature of the Nevuah Moshe Rabbeinu in Devarim in relationship to the other Chumshei Torah. However, it's the Ramban's Perush on the Torah which we're going to focus on today, and in particular, probably the one of the most famous issues which arises not only in the Rishonim but also in Chazal, is one of the several discrepancies and differences that appear between the Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments, in Parshas Yisrael in Shmos, and the Aseres HaDibros in Parshas Ve'asChanan. And even Chazal were aware that, in fact, actually they were, in a certain sense, different, as we'll see, from several Gemaras, but in particular, the Aseres HaDibros in Yisrael is something that's called Dibros Rishonos, and the Aseres HaDibros, as they appear in Devarim, Chazal referred to as Dibros Shliyos. Okay, we're going to speak about that in Yetzer Hashem a little later. In any case, the Ramban, in his Hagdama, his introduction to Devarim, commenting upon the, actually it's not really introduction, it's actually on the first pasuk, commenting on the fact that it says in the Torah that in Devarim itself, reading from the pasuk, right? Be'eva hayarden, this is in Parak Aleph, pasuk K. Be'eva hayarden be'eretz Moav, hooil Moshe be'er es atera zois leimor. So we see that Devarim has what's called a bir of Moshe Rabbeinu on the Torah. Now, what is this bir? What is this bir? So, in fact, the Ramban speaks about this in the very, very end of his commentary on what I believe to be the first pasuk, and he says, "V'nei hiskir b'kan shnei devarim." Right, the Torah here mentions two things. Omar, he says, "Diber Moshe b'nei Yisrael k'chol ha'shitziv Hashem Yisrael aleihem." Right, Moshe Rabbeinu is going to speak to Klal Yisrael everything which HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded him to say to them. This is a remez. This alludes to the mitzvahs which are going to appear in Devarim, which did not appear explicitly in Shmos. The Ramban is saying is that, of course, these mitzvahs were not chas v'shalom by Moshe Rabbeinu, but were commanded by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom nizku ad heina b'Torah. Right? ואמר שהם ככל אשר ציווה עשה השם לא הוסיף לגוע על מה שנסתר. Moshe Rabbeinu chas v'shalom did not add subtract in the mitzvahs, even though they only appear in Devarim, they were commanded to him from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, just like all the mitzvahs were. And why did Moshe have to the Torah to say this? Because it doesn't say Vayidab Hashem al Moshe. In other words, since it says Vayidab Hashem al Moshe, so Moshe there has to say, right, meaning that they were commanded to Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, that's point number one. But point number two, which we're going to focus on, is ואמר. In addition, it says, כי הואיל מוישה ברס התורה. וזה רמז במצווה שנאמרו כבר, and this is a remez to mitzvahs that were already said, שיחזור אותם. The Moshe Rabbeinu should repeat them over, לבאר אותם, to explain them, and listen to this lashon of the Ramban, ולחדש בהם דברים, to say novellae. וטעם הואיל Moshe. Once again, it says in pasuk, hey, הואיל Moshe beres hatera azos leimor. What's הואיל Moshe? So the Ramban says, שרצה לבלם es hatera. The Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to explain them the Torah. והזכיר כאן להודיע כי מעצמו יראה לעשות כן. ולא ציווה השם בזה. Moshe Rabbeinu did it of his own volition. Not that the Kadosh Baruch Hu commanded him. Mlshon הואל na ולין וואלנו ונשב רבים. Rabban brings digmois, examples in the psukim where it says like that. Okay, so in other words, basically, we have here actually three important concepts. Concept number one is there's a beer of the Torah, an explanation of the Torah. Second concept is there's also l'chadsh by Devarim. There are chidushim, novellae. And Hoil means that in fact Moshe Rabbeinu initiated them. He initiated. That's the lashon of the Ramban. Okay, now, having said that, we're going to in fact actually go and focus on probably one of the most famous distinctions between, like I mentioned before, we're going to go to the luchas, what's called usually the luchas shnias, even though in fact actually we'll see what this is called, luchas shnias. The second time that says Devarim, the Ten Commandments appear in the Torah is in Devarim parts of Eschana. And as you all know, that in Shmois, in Parshas Yisrael, it says, right, Zocher es Shem HaShabbos l'Kodshay, remember Sabbath unto its holiness. And in Devarim, it says, Shamor, right? Shamor es Shem HaShabbos l'Kodshay. That's what it says in Parshas Eschana, in Parakeh, Pasuk Yud Beis. So of course, why in fact the Moshe Rabbeinu is repeating over the Aseret HaDevarim to Klal Yisrael? Why in Parshas Eschana is there a change in the lashon, in the tzivur, the mitzvah of Shabbos, from Zocher to Shamor? So I'm going to read here.
It's going to explain the contradiction. If the Ramban says that everything is from Sinai, and
we're going to speak about this. We're going to get to this. This is okay. We're going to get to this. Of course, everything's in Pia Kavula. That's our initial assumption. We're going to get to this.
But
we're going to get to that. The Ramban is going to say it. We're going to get to this. Okay, now in Pasuk Yud Beis, the Ramban says, "V'hischil levar lahem shama b'mokum zocha." Okay, we're going to be medayik in the Ramban, kederech harishayim, that every word is important. The medium is part of the message. V'hischil levar lahem shama b'mokum zocha al derech hapshat. So in other words, the Ramban learns that Shamar is a biur of Zocher. Shamar is, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling us, is interpreting us. I wouldn't say call it translation. A biur means Moshe Rabbeinu is explaining to us what does Zocher means. Zocher means Shamar. That's what the Ramban learns. Al derech hapshat means v'hizchel levar lahem Shamar b'mokum Zocher. That's the pshat. So the pshat is what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing here, is explaining to us, what does zocha mean? Zocha means shamor. That's how the Ramban understands pshuto shel mikra. Okay. V'aldas Rabbi Seinu. Now when the Ramban says aldas Rabbi Seinu means, he's coming to distinguish between what he calls pshuto shel mikra and the droshes of Chazal. V'aldas Rabbi Seinu. B'dibo echad nemru. So Chazal say, that Zocha v'Shama was said b'dibo echad. So therefore, how do we fit that pshat back into the Chumash? So says the Ramban, Ubil Lemzeh, Moshe Rabbeinu explained them this. What does he explain to them? That is to say, Kihem kulam yoidim zocha. They all knew zocha. The zocha was said at Har Sinai. For Yodiya, and Moshe Rabbeinu informs them, Ki shama nerma imai. The shama was set together with zocha. Meaning, the way I understand the Ramban is that in fact there's the Torah shebi'al peh, which Moshe Rabbeinu was makabel at Sinai, as well as the Torah shebechsav, as the Rambam begins his otam to the Mishnah Torah, and Moshe Rabbeinu is informing Klal Yisrael that even though they heard zocha, and the zocha that was heard at Har Sinai, I would say that's really in a certain sense the Torah shebechsav. Moshe Rabbeinu also heard Shama too. That's how I understand is the pshat in the Ramban.
But the people did not.
No, the people didn't hear that. In other words, the Torah shebechsav was set over. Was set over, in fact, actually by Moshe Rabbeinu, or set over the Herbi Piagavura. This is, of course, a very machlokas rishonim on this issue, the Rambam and the Ramban. But in any case, right, Moshe Rabbeinu is explained to them that, in fact, actually, even though they heard Zocha, Shama was set together with it. Okay? And this is actually, in a certain sense, the Ramban L'Shitose. The Ramban understands that the first two Dibros, which Chazal saying Chavdal Bar Aleph in Makkos, was said Mipiagvura. They heard Mipiagvura. They heard explicitly, Anoich L'Yelecha. But of course, the other Dibros, they heard the Kol of Hashem, with that was called Chiduchi Ois. You didn't hear specific words. And but the fact is, so what does it mean to say that Shama was set with them? So when Moshe Rabbeinu communicated to them that Kosh Baruch Hu said to them Zocha, he said in addition here in Devarim that Shama was set together with that too.
If they didn't hear Chiduchi Ois,
very good, yeah, but you have to say, because here on the other end the Ramban says that the Kulam Yudim Zocha, I didn't know Zocha, so Moshe Rabbeinu communicated to them the sound Zocha, because that was intended to be commanded to Klal Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu said that in addition, Shama was said to. That's the Ramban. But I think really what we have here is, what the Ramban really is saying is, I think this really understand, is that when Chazal say B'dibo echad nemru, this is the way I understand the Ramban. It's not like this magic thing that somehow this mystical thing, Shama and Zocher, are one word, but rather what the Ramban is learning, the pshat of Chazal, based upon really what the pshat is saying. In Al Derech HaPshat, in a certain sense, there's a certain analogy. Then in fact there's what's called something that was heard, that we call quote-unquote a Torah shebechsav, and there's a type of what's called a Torah shebi'al peh, that was communicated to Moshe Rabbeinu, which they didn't hear at Har Sinai, but Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to inform them of this Torah shebi'al peh in Avos Moav. So in other words, however we learn, right, it's clear that the Ramban understands that Shamor in the Chumash is part and parcel of a Torah shebi'al peh. Al-pi, his first pshat, it's a bir of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, chas v'shalom, we're not saying that this bir is not mipiagvura, but in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu is basically coming to explain to them perhaps what he hears here in Devarim. That Kodesh Baruch, right, that in fact the understanding of Zoch is really Shamor. And secondly, an alternative pshat of Chazal is very similar. That in fact the bir of Zocha was said actually at Sinai, and this Moshe Rabbeinu was first communicated to them in Avos Moav and Pasha V'Eschana. That's, we can say, the way the Ramban learns. Now, so in other words, what the basic point I want to make is, right, is that in fact we have over here is Shoma Yom Shabbos L'Kodshay is a type of a Torah shebi'al peh. It's either an interpretation of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't make this up, chas v'shalom, because the Ramban says that everything that the Shechina b'daberes b'toich groinai, that the Shechina was speaking from the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, somehow we understand these interpretations are ultimately divine, of divine authority, but the fact is that Shama Shem Shabbos L'Kotshay indicates a Torah Shebe'al Peh. A Torah Shebe'al Peh. That means an oral law that was heard in addition to the Zocha Shem Shabbos L'Kotshay, which is, we call the Torah Shebe'al. And that's what Shama is referring to, yeah.
Why did he not reveal this to them at Har Sinai?
And
this halachas that come out from...
Yeah, okay.
Whereas women are going to be chayav...
So it's interesting like this. It's interesting that why he didn't reveal them at Har Sinai, there are no answers for this. However, let's go back to the Chazon Ish that we began this series. The Chazon Ish said that the distinctions in the Lashonos in the different parts of the Chumash are coming to Mimarames us to the midas which Chazal used to darshan the psukim. Now, in a certain sense, this actually represents a type of a drasha. What's a drasha? Because there's a famous Gemara in Chafam Beis that you just began saying the Gemara. The Gemara in Chafam Beis in Brachos says, "Amar Rav Ada ba'ava noshim chayos bekiddush hayoim dvar Torah." The women are chayav to make kiddush. Amai mitzvahs. So the Gemara says, why are they chayav in kiddush? Mitzvahs asher seman gromaru. Right? It's a positive mitzvah which is a function of time, of specific times. Okay, so the Gemara goes on to explain. Ela Amar Rava, says Rava, Zacha v'shamar. It says Zacha v'shamar. Kol sheyesh lo b'shmira yesh lo b'schira. Whoever is chayav in shmira is chayav in schira. V'hani nashi, and women hoyel b'sneil b'shmira. Since women are chayav in shmira, because shmira refers to the surim of Shabbos, the malachas of Shabbos. So therefore, it's neil b'schira. Now, when you think about it, what's being made here is what's called a hekesh. This is clearly a hekesh. This is the lashon of a hekesh. The Gemara, this question, the lashon, the Gemara makes many times of hekesh, let's say matzah and chametz, etc., etc. In other words, this is the lashon of a hekesh, which means that really, as an answer to your question, now what the real reason is, I don't know, but the working answer to your question is that the placement of Shamar in Vayischanan as opposed to Zacha in Yisrael is coming to communicate to me the principle of a hekesh, because Shamar is the perush of Zacha, and through that hekesh, Chazal learned the halacha that women are chayiv in kiddush hayoim, dvar Torah. So in other words, we see over here that the Ramban understood, right, that Shamar is in fact really a perush of Zacha, and is really a teresh b'al peh. Now, the two perushim that the Ramban gives can be understood in one of two ways. Either we can say, well, al das Rabbi Seder, which is Chazal, that it was, if we use the lashon of the Rambam, right, in the Mishnah Torah, in the Parashat Mishnayos, in Sheresh Beis, in the Sefer Mitzvahs, according to the Perush Rabbi Seinu, it's what's called the halachas hamakubalos. In other words, halachas that were communicated at Har Sinai. And according to the first Perush Hadach Pshat, Sham would be like a drush of Chazal. Of course, Moshe Rabbeinu says things be piagvura, but this is a type of drush of Chazal. Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to mevarer Zocher. The Zocher, in fact, actually is a type of a perush and a perush on Zocher, and more importantly, is the type of a hekesh that Moshe Rabbeinu is making between Zocher and Shamar. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu understands that, in fact, Zocher refers to the schir of Shabbos not to do malacha. The ikar schir of Shabbos not to do malacha. And it's interesting that the Rambam, in, I think it's Paraglam L'chol Shabbos, says that the time to make kiddush is really before Shabbos begins. So I understand the makor of the Rambam is actually this hekesh. Since the schira is the kiddush, which comes to Zocher Shabbos is not to do work, it makes sense to make kiddush before Shabbos begins. Make kiddush before Shabbos begins, then in fact that you remember not to be chalo Shabbos. and that's Zocher Shabbasapas Lakotche. In any case, what the bottom line which I want to make over here is that the Ramban understood clearly that the Shoma Shemi Shabbos Lakotche is in fact actually a type of a Tereh Shebial Peh. It's a biur of the lashon of Zocher, and in fact actually it's a and Chazal is said to be a hekesh made by Moshe Rabbeinu, which is actually serves as a makor to what has been said. I mean, before that, why in fact is hekesh not included in Yugim Midas? We actually explained this in the shiur of the Yugim Midas. Is that in fact actually a hekesh is like it's written in the Torah itself. So here we see that Shomer is actually written in the Torah itself. Okay, now, yeah.
So is the Ramban rejecting the idea that the version of the Luchas and Chanan is what was written on the second Luchas?
Okay, so that gets me to a very interesting thing. When it gets a little while, we're going to actually see something that was written by Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky and Embassy Yankov. We're going to speak about that. That's an introduction to the next thing I'm going to speak about. There's an incredible Gemara in Bava Kama, the Ndalma Beis and Hebed Aleph. I want to quote the Gemara to you. The last two lines in Bava Kama, Nun Dalet Amud Beis, 54 Folio B in your Art School edition. Shol Rabbi Chanina ben Agil es Rabbi Chia Ba'Abba. Rabbi Chanina ben Agil es Rabbi Chia Ba'Abba. B'pnei ma b'dibros harishonish lo nema behem toiv. Uvedibros achroinis nema behem toiv. In other words, in the mitzvah, right, of kibbutz v'av v'em, right, even though we know in Parshas Yisrael, the Torah speaks about arichas yomim, but we see in Parshas V'eschanan that it says this is Perakei Pasuk Tezayin, Ulaman yitavloch, which doesn't appear in the Dibros in Parshas Yisrael. L'man yitavlach. So Rabbi Chanina ben Agil es Rabbi Ba'Abba. Why? Why in the Dibros Rishonis does it not say Toiv in relationship to Arichas Yamin? In Dibros Achronos it says Toiv. Right. That's the question that's being asked in the Gemara. Nemak Rabban Toiv says Rashi. Okay, it's based on Arichas Yamin in both places. That's the question that's asked. Amalei. So it gives him an incredible answer. Amalei. He says, before you ask me why, ask me if was Tov even said there. Im lav, or if not. She'ein yodea, I don't know, im nema bem toiv, im lav. I don't know if toiv was said or not said. So he said, Kalach etz Rab Tanchum ben Chaniloi, you should go to Rab Tanchum ben Chaniloi, Sharad etz Rab Shua ben Levi, who used to learn, right? He used to learn, learn with, or be with Rab Shua ben Levi, Shayabaki ba'gada. Rab Shua ben Levi was known to be a baki and agadata. So he went to him. He says, I didn't hear anything of Yeshua ben Levi. Since the luchos were going to be broken, that's why Toiv was not mentioned in these luchos. Okay, whatever that means. Now, this is an incredible thing. He didn't know what the Toiv is written in the Chumash. Now, I know you're going to say, oh no, it's not a kasha, this and that. I want to just quote the Pnei Yehושע. The Pnei Yehושע says, Hinei kol ha'koirei, whoever reads this Gemara, yishtoimem al kacha. Right? Is shocked. Right? I mean, Rab Chia Ba'Abba didn't know what's written in the Torah? That's the question that he asks. Okay, now, in the Emes Sefer Emes Liyankov, Rabbi Yankov Kamenetsky Zatzal, in Devarim, Perakei Yud Beis, here's a little bit of a hakira. What was written on the luchos? Was Zocher written on the luchos? Was Shoma written on the luchos? Okay. So, and of course it says, Zoch v'shamra b'divar echad nemro. So Bianca wants to say that it could possibly be there was a kli kasiv on the luchais. That's what he wants to say. A kli kasiv on the luchais. It really, maybe it was written one way, they read it another way. And that's how he wants to explain. Right, the lush of the chumash and devarim. And in fact, he wants to say that maybe that's the pshat in the Gemara in Bava Kama. The question was, what was written in the luchais? Okay, that's what he wants to say. Okay, it's a nice pshat, but it's a little bit bria yesh miyayin. I mean, it doesn't, certainly the Gemara, there's no remez, no allusion to the Gemara to speak what was written in the luchais.
Remember the Rishonim in Greek see if it's going back.
Whatever, yeah, I don't. I mean, it's a little pshat, but I don't think it has anything to do with the Gemara. But in any case, what I wanted to say is maybe the question is the following question. Okay? First of all, it doesn't say luchais, it's dibros. But it's interesting that, and why did, and that's what the Ben Yeshua addresses this, right? The Ben Yeshua addresses this. I mean, why is the Gemara focusing on Leman Yitav, right? And not on other different distinctions between the dibros Rishonos, dibros Shniyos. So, I thought, in fact, to understand the question of the Gemara in the following way. And by the way, you should look at the Ben Yeshua. He has a beautiful arichas on that. He also he himself says he has a.
Where is this Ben Yeshua?
It's on the Bava Kama.
On the Bava Kama.
Alatar. And there the Ben Yeshua has a beautiful dosh on this, but I want to claim the following like this. First of all, the differences between luchas dibros yishar dibros shniyos, what's called dibros achronos, right, is in a certain sense Moshe Rabbeinu's biur. It's a halachic biur. Moshe Rabbeinu, the distinctions between dibros yishar and dibros achronos can be attributed, like Ramban says, the Moshe Rabbeinu's biur of the luchais, of the luchais. In fact, it's not possible. It's mashal from many chazals, even from the Ramban a little bit, from Yishayim, that actually when Moshe Rabbeinu was actually saying over was given the volley, he probably held the luchai shniyas in his hands. So it's like a kriyas hatera. You get on the kriyas hatera, there's the kere, there's the betalgim. I saw Rabbi Yosha Soloveitchik. He wants to say that it's a dugma of Har Sinai. In other words, we have all the elements here of the Teresh B'Yapeh was actually a beer when there was a kriyas hatera. So what we have over here is what was the question? The question is all the additions, distinctions between Rishos and Achronos, right, are halachic because Moshe Rabbeinu's biur. But what's Leman Yitavlach? What's Leman Yitavlach? Leman Yitavlach doesn't really have anything to do with a halachic biur. It's like an agadita. I mean, agadita. Now, so what's interesting is it's mashman the Yishayim. The Rambam is baramis to this too. Right? Is that first of all, Ramban says Bipia gavua kasher pirashti hoisif biur b'dover. Right? Uleficha hoisif leman yitavlach. No, the Ramban says there was also but it says hoisif. Moshe Rabbeinu was moisif. Now you're asking to me what was the lush of the Ramban? Biur and chidish devarim מעצמו. I want to say this is called chidish devarim מעצמו. This is a haisafa. In other words, shomer Hashem Shabbos Lakotshai is a biur. It's a perush on the first luchos, right? By the way, for the Ramban is pashut. On the luchos written zoch Hashem Shabbos Lakotshai. Moshe Rabbeinu had the luchos maybe shniyos in front of him and was reading from them, but he was ma'isiv a biur shomer. Chas v'shalom, shomer was not written in luchos. The Ramban says everybody heard Zachor. Shomer was Moshe Rabbeinu's biur on the luchais. However, why was
Ramban says that? Or
what?
Ramban says that, or it's pasha from Ramban? He says the luchas shniyos were the same as Rishonos.
That's what I'm saying. Because it says everybody heard Zachor. Moshe Rabbeinu should have told them that. But that's what I understand. Because right, he says biur. A biur doesn't mean he's reading from something. A biur means he's giving an explanation, interpretation. Mipiakvul, of course, but interpretation. So now, what we have is, but what's Leman Yitapav? The Ram says that's a hoisafa. What's the Hisofa? So I want to claim maybe this is what the Ramban says. We read in the Ramban that from Moshe Rabbeinu we see two things. We see number one, a bil, and he was bechadish by Devarim. Chidish means he was meisif things. Chas v'shom, everything will be piak gvura too, like the Ramban says. He was meisif be gvura. Now what's the Hisofa? So it's mashma been the Ramban here too, but in the other Rishabasha too, of course, Laman Yitav, the Chazal Darshan is speaking about Olam Haba. Scham mitzvahs by Amalek, Laman Yitav Lach, the Osed Lavai. In other words, and that we understand, like the Ebenezer says, is one of the Seidas HaTorah. Now, what's Moshe Rabbeinu we know that in addition to giving the Teras HaNigla, also gave what's called the Teras HaNista. The Ramban says explicitly there's a Dhamma to his Perish on the Chumash in Bereshis. In other words, so what we have things which are halachic, and that's called bia, and then we have things that Moshe Rabbeinu mischadesh, which Ramban says is he was meisif, right? And the Isafa is things which are from the Seidas HaTorah. Here is a remes to what's called the Scham mitzvahs. The Scham mitzvahs Leika B'hai Alma, but rather are in Olam Haba. That's what I want to say the Ramban is referring to. That's the Isafa. Now, as proof of this, or as a raya to this, I want to bring a raya to this, something else that appears in the difference of the Dibros. Because in relationship, for example, when the Torah says in the second Dibra, right, both in Yisrael, both V'Yaschanan, it says that Kodesh Baruch Hu is El Kana Poiker. I'm here in Parakeh, Pasuk Tes. El Kana, it says El Kana Poiker. I'm sorry, El Kana Poiker Ovid Ovis Albonim V'Ashleshim V'Rabim L'Sinai. So here we speak about the Kodesh Baruch Hu is going to be Poiker Ovid Ovis Albonim, and it says also Chezel Alofim. And then later on in Devarim, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is actually in Devarim and Veschanan. This is also Perek Zayin, beginning in Pasuk Tes. Moshe Rabbeinu is also, I think, referring to Luchas too, but it says, "V'yadatik Hashem lakechu Elokim ha'kel ha'ne'eman shem ha'bris v'achesed lo yavav l'shem mitzvaysim la'elav dor u'mishalim l'soinav el panov lahavidoi lo ya'achel l'soinav el panov yishalim loy." And I think Moshe Rabbeinu here is referring to the Dibros, but here there's a change of the Lashon, right? He speaks about Umishalim L'Soinav El Panov. It's a little bit of a stira. There it says, it's mashma in the Dibros themselves, it's speaking about to the Bana, but here it says El Panov. So it's very, very interesting that the Ramban says here that there's a remes here till Gilgulim. And look at the Ramban here. There's like a remes that a Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's speaking about Rosha V'Toivloi, and there's a remes that's Tzadik V'Raloi, there's a remes, the Ramban says Al Panov, it's a side in the Torah. V'yesh b'milah Panov soi b'Rosha V'Toivloi, which is a remes il Gulim. This is also a Hisofa Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a Hisofa al Pisaid. And this is what the Ramban is referring to as his chidish devar me'atzmo. Me'atzmo means he decided to reveal a side b'remes, right? Of course, the side is he received also from like the Ramban says as Akdama to the Torah. He received the Torah that was written in the Isis of the Shem Hashem. But in other words, and this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was meisif, right? So in other words, I want to say that here we understand that in the Ramban. We understand that here we have in the reading of the Psukim, there's a remes, not a remes. Ramban learns this explicitly to a Torah shebi'al peh, a Torah shebi'al peh, that Moshe Rabbeinu heard me piak vura. Either it was said at Sinai, or it was said to him during the Aboy B'Shana. So Moshe Shama is actually, Moshe Rabbeinu is communicating a Torah shebi'al peh that he heard. Right? And then, in these Haisafas, which we have, L'man Yitav, and Misham L'Seinav, El Panov, there's also a remes to a side that Moshe Rabbeinu also heard when he received the Torah Piak Vura, and he's been merames to that in these Haisafas here too. So we see clearly here in the Perush Aramban that the scripture is actually referring to a Torah shebi'al peh that Moshe Rabbeinu heard mipi hagvura, and now is communicating that Torah to Klal Yisrael. That's what I want to say is in the Ramban. So we see inherent in the Ramban is an oral tradition of the written law. Okay, now, I think up to now we've established in Chazal the existence of this oral tradition, and both in the Ramban al Chumash, which was based upon Chazal and Medrash and the reading of the Psukim themselves. And what I'd like to begin is actually, now that we have these Hagdamas, and those of you who have convinced that this thing exists, so the question is, how did Chazal make use of this in actually the halachas themselves? And this will, Mitzvah Shem, will be the subject matter for the next of the shiurim that we will give in this series. And until then, from a undisclosed location, Yerushalayim, be well.